pull into a gas station late at night, thinking it'll be just a quick stop. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The silence is heavy, and the shadows stretch just a little too far. But what if this ordinary stop became the start of your worst nightmare? Tonight we're diving into 3 chilling true stories from gas stations at night, where the glow of the pumps is the only light against the darkness. From strangers who vanish into thin air, to eerie figures who watch from the shadows, and night shift workers who are never seen again. Each story is more terrifying than the last, and trust me, you won't want to miss the final tale. It just might make you think twice before pulling into a gas station after dark. So, fuel up, keep your doors locked, and stay with me. Because sometimes the real horror isn't in the dark. It's right in front of you. It was a quiet Tuesday night when Jake pulled into the gas station on the edge of town. The station was one of those 24-hour places, lit up like a beacon in the middle of nowhere. Jake had been driving for hours, his eyes heavy and his gas tank nearly empty. He just needed to fill up, grab a coffee, and get back on the road. The station was deserted except for the cashier, a bored-looking teenager scrolling on his phone behind the counter. Jake parked at pump 9, got out of his car, and started filling the tank. The night was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, and Jake shoved his hands into his pockets, trying to stay warm. That's when he noticed the man. He was standing at the edge of the parking lot, just outside the glow of the overhead lights. Jake couldn't make out his face, but he could see the man's silhouette, tall and thin, his posture unnaturally stiff. Jake glanced around, but there was no one else in sight. The cashier was still inside, oblivious. Jake tried to ignore the man, focusing on the gas pump, but when he looked up again, the man was closer. Much closer. He was now standing at the edge of the parking lot, his face still obscured by shadows. Jake's heart began to race. He told himself it was just his imagination, but something about the man felt wrong. The gas pump clicked off, and Jake quickly replaced the nozzle, his hands trembling. He kept his eyes on the man as he walked toward the station, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The automatic doors slid open, and Jake stepped inside, the warmth of the store doing little to ease his nerves. The cashier looked up briefly, then went back to his phone. Jake grabbed a coffee from the machine and a bag of chips, his eyes darting to the window. The man was still there, standing motionless, his face turned toward the station. Jake paid quickly, his hands shaking as he handed over the cash. "Hey, do you know that guy outside?" The cashier glanced out the window, then shrugged. "What guy?" Jake's stomach dropped. He turned to look, and the man was gone. The parking lot was empty, the only movement coming from the flickering fluorescent lights. Jake grabbed his things and hurried back to his car, his heart pounding. He started the engine and pulled out of the station, his eyes scanning the darkness. The road ahead was empty, the only light coming from his headlights. He drove for a few minutes, trying to shake off the unease when he saw it. The man was standing on the side of the road, his face illuminated by the headlights. Jake slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a halt. The man was gone again, but Jake could see something in the road. A figure, lying motionless. Jake's heart raced as he got out of the car, his breath visible in the cold air. The figure was a woman, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She was clutching a piece of paper, her hands trembling. "Help me. He's coming." Jake knelt beside her, his mind racing. Who's coming? What happened? The woman didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Jake grabbed his phone and called 911, his hands shaking as he explained the situation. The operator told him to stay where he was, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced around, the darkness pressing in on him. That's when he saw the man again, standing at the edge of the trees. His face was still obscured, but Jake could see his smile, wide and unnatural, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. Jake's blood ran cold. He got back in his car and locked the doors, his hands trembling on the wheel. The man didn't move, but his smile widened, his head tilting unnaturally to one side. The police arrived a few minutes later, their sirens cutting through the silence. Jake told them everything, but when they searched the area, there was no sign of the man or the woman. The road was empty. The only evidence of what had happened was the piece of paper the woman had been clutching. It was a photo of Jake, taken at the gas station. On the back was a single word: next. It was past midnight when Mia pulled into the gas station. She had been driving for hours, her eyes heavy and her mind foggy. The station was one of those old, run-down places. Flickering neon lights, cracked pavement, and a sign that read, "Open 24 hours" in faded letters. Mia didn't care. She just needed gas, a snack, and maybe a bathroom break. The station was eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the overhead lights. Mia parked at the nearest pump and got out of her car, shivering in the cold night air. She glanced around, but there was no one in sight. No other cars, no customers, not even an attendant. The store looked empty, its windows dark and the door slightly ajar. Mia filled her tank quickly, her eyes darting around the parking lot. Something about the place made her skin crawl. She grabbed her purse and headed for the store, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The automatic doors didn't open, so she pushed them apart and stepped inside. The store was dimly lit, the shelves stocked with dusty snacks and expired sodas. The air smelled stale, like old cigarettes and mildew. Mia. "Hello? Is anyone here?" She walked to the counter, where a cash register sat open, its drawer empty. Mia. "Weird." Mia muttered, grabbing a bag of chips and a bottle of water. She left a few dollars on the counter, figuring she'd pay on her way out. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something strange. The bathroom door was slightly open, a faint light spilling out from inside. Mia hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to leave. But curiosity got the better of her. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bathroom was small and dirty, the mirror cracked and the sink stained with rust. But what caught Mia's attention was the writing on the wall. It was scrawled in red, the letters jagged and uneven. "Get out while you can." Mia's heart raced as she backed out of the bathroom, her hands trembling. She turned to leave the store, but the automatic doors were closed and they wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, panic rising in her chest, but the doors were stuck. That's when she heard it. A faint tapping sound, like someone knocking on glass. It was coming from behind the counter. Mia's breath caught in her throat as she crept closer, her heart pounding. She peered over the counter and froze. There was a man crouched underneath, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. He was holding a flashlight, its beam flickering weakly. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for Mia to be quiet. "Mia, what's going on?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. The man shook his head, his eyes darting to the ceiling. "Man, it's up there. It's watching us." Mia's blood ran cold. "Mia, what's up there?" Before the man could answer, the lights in the store flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Mia screamed, scrambling back as the tapping sound grew louder, more frantic. She fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight and shining it around the store. The man was gone. Mia's heart pounded as she backed away from the counter, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The tapping sound was everywhere now, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. She turned to run, but the doors were still stuck. She grabbed a chair and hurled it at the glass, shattering it and creating an opening just big enough to crawl through. She didn't look back as she ran to her car, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the keys. She started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, her heart racing. She didn't stop until she was miles away, the gas station just a distant memory. The next day, Mia called the police and told them everything. They searched the station, but found no sign of the man or anything unusual. The store was abandoned, its shelves empty and its doors locked. The police chalked it up to Mia being tired and stressed, but she knew what she had seen. A week later, Mia was cleaning out her car when she found something under the passenger seat. It was a flashlight, its beam flickering weakly, and etched into the side was a single word: run. Ethan hated working the night shift. He had taken the job at the gas station to save up some extra cash, but he never imagined how unsettling the nights could be. The station sat at the crossroads of two highways, miles away from the nearest town. Surrounded by dense woods, it felt like an island of light in an ocean of darkness. It was a Wednesday night around 2 a.m. when the quiet turned to something more sinister. The night had been slow, just a couple of truckers and a tired traveler or two. Ethan had passed the time by scrolling through his phone and restocking the shelves. The old fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the hum of the refrigerators provided a constant backdrop. He had just finished cleaning the coffee machine when the door chime rang. He looked up, expecting to see a customer, but the store was empty. He glanced outside, but the pumps were deserted and no cars were in sight. Ethan shivered. The air felt colder, and the hairs on his neck stood up. He walked to the door, pushing it open to check the lot. The night was still, the trees at the edge of the parking lot swaying gently in the breeze. He stepped back inside, shaking off the unease. A few minutes later, the chime rang again. Ethan spun around, but the store was still empty. His pulse quickened. He moved to the security monitor behind the counter, rewinding the footage. The video showed the automatic doors sliding open, but there was no one there. Ethan, great, he muttered, convincing himself it was a glitch. But then the screen flickered. Static washed over the footage, and when the image cleared, a shadow stood at the edge of the camera's view. It was tall, its form more of a smudge against the dim light outside. Ethan blinked, and the shadow was gone. He felt a chill run down his spine. He picked up the phone and dialed his manager's number, but the line was dead. His cell phone had no service. The gas station's Wi-Fi had never worked properly, and tonight was no exception. Ethan decided to lock the doors until morning. As he moved to switch the sign to closed, the lights flickered and the store plunged into darkness. He stood frozen, the silence swallowing him. He fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight. Ethan. Hello? He called out, his voice trembling. Something shuffled in the back of the store. It was a soft sound, like shoes scuffing against the tile floor. Ethan turned his flashlight toward the sound, the beam casting long shadows along the aisles. Ethan, is someone there? Silence. He moved slowly, his sneakers squeaking with every step. As he reached the back of the store, he noticed the door to the storage room was slightly open. He knew he had closed it earlier. He reached out, pushing it open with the tip of his shoe. The room was dark, the only light coming from his phone. Boxes were stacked against the walls and cleaning supplies sat on a rusted metal shelf. Ethan took a step inside, his breath visible in the cold air. The door slammed shut behind him. He screamed, spinning around, but the door was firmly closed. He pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the room was plunged into darkness. When the light returned, a figure stood at the back of the room. It was tall and thin. its skin a sickly gray. Its eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to pull the light into them. The figure moved forward, its limbs bending in unnatural angles. Ethan backed away, his back hitting the shelves. Cans and boxes tumbled to the floor, the noise deafening in the small space. "Ethan, stay away!" he shouted, but his voice was nothing more than a whisper. The figure continued its slow, deliberate approach. Its mouth opened, but instead of a scream, a low, guttural hiss filled the room. Ethan's flashlight died, the darkness enveloping him. He felt cold hands wrap around his wrists, the touch sending ice through his veins. He thrashed, kicking and struggling, but the grip tightened. He could hear the shelves rattling, the contents crashing to the floor, but he couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. And then, silence. When the lights came back on, the store was empty. The aisles were pristine, the shelves fully stocked. The door to the storage room hung open, revealing nothing but boxes and cleaning supplies. The next morning, a customer arrived to find the store open but empty. The gas pumps worked, the register was operational, but there was no sign of Ethan. The security footage showed him behind the counter until 2:14 a.m., when the screen turned to static. When the video resumed, the store was empty. Weeks later, the store hired a new night shift worker. On his first night, the chime rang just after 2 a.m. The worker looked up, seeing no one there. He glanced at the security monitor, and a shadow stood at the edge of the camera's view. The manager found the worker's car in the parking lot the next morning. The store was empty, the doors wide open. The only clue was the footage on the monitor, showing a shadow moving slowly through the aisles, followed by a low, guttural hiss. No one ever worked the night shift at that gas station again. And there you have it. 3 terrifying true stories from gas stations at night. From the unsettling stranger at Pump 9 to the eerie mystery of the vanishing attendant and the bone-chilling tale of the last stop. These stories prove that even the most ordinary places can become nightmares after dark. If these stories sent shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments which story haunted you the most. Was it the mysterious figure watching from the shadows, the chilling message in the bathroom, or the disappearance of the night shift worker? And if you love a good scare, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another terrifying tale from the 6th frequency. Thanks for watching, and remember, when you're alone at a gas station at night, always trust your instincts. Stay curious, stay scared, and I'll see you in the next video.